Now, I've read that report, as I'm sure others have, and nowhere in that report, nowhere, does it mention £22 billion.
Whenever Starmer and the Labour government are questioned, the first thing they do is quote that the former government left a £22 billion black hole. Whether there is the issue of mishandling of protesters or arresting peaceful social media commentators, Starmer seems to sprinkle the £22 billion crisis to justify his actions. Until now, everyone believed that. However, an MP has exposed this financial scandal, making Starmer and Labour MPs hide their faces. But what did he expose, and what's the reality of the £22 billion gap for which Starmer put heavy taxes, austerity measures, and ending services like winter fuel payments? In this video, let's know how Starmer used lies and deception, and let's expose the £22 billion black hole. Let's get started. The claim of a £22 billion financial black hole in the UK's public finances under Labour has become one of the most controversial narratives in recent political memory. Widely used to justify austerity measures, tax hikes and spending cuts, this figure has been central to heated debates about the state of the economy under Labour's leadership.
When the Labour Chief Secretary of the Treasury, Liam Byrne, wrote that there was no money left, he was telling the truth. But in what has been dubbed the biggest lie in British politics, Rachel Reeves, the artful dodger of 11 Downing Street, takes us for fools in an effort to pick your pocket.
I've inherited a projected overspend of £22 billion. A £22 billion hole in the public finances now. Yeah. Not in the future, but now. £22 billion of spending this year that was covered up.
The Labour Party is now in government, which means it chooses the balance between taxation and spending, and it chooses where spending falls. So it's decided to take £1.5 billion off pensioners to give it to its chums in the public sector. From Tory voters to Labour voters, what a surprise. It's taken the decision to spend £8 billion on GB Energy, the green energy company, which it once claimed would save you an extra £300 on your energy bills. Both the Prime Minister and the Energy Secretary, Ed Miliband, have now forgotten about this saving because it was probably never there. The trick, the legerdemain, the dishonesty is in pretending that this is not a conscious choice, but force majeure, inventing a £22 billion black hole and blaming the Tories while spending £8 billion on green energy that won't cut your bills and £11 billion on overseas climate aid is simply dishonest.
Critics argue it was more a tool of political manipulation than an accurate representation of fiscal reality. The infamous figure first surfaced in Labour's budget announcements, with Chancellor Rachel Reeves framing it as a crisis inherited from the previous Conservative government. Reeves and Prime Minister Keir Starmer described the gap as a dire threat to the nation's financial stability, positioning themselves as the leaders tasked with cleaning up the economic mess. They argued that the gap necessitated tough fiscal measures, including the cutting of winter fuel payments for pensioners, tax increases for businesses, and reduced public sector spending.
It means, Mr. Speaker, that we have inherited a projected overspend of £22 billion. A £22 billion hole in the public finances now. Yeah. Not in the future, but now. £22 billion of spending this year that was covered up by the...
However, a closer examination of this reveals serious discrepancies. The Office for Budget Responsibility, the body responsible for producing economic forecasts for the government, denied the existence of a £22 billion figure in its reports. Instead, it identified a shortfall of £9.5 billion earlier in the year, attributed to incomplete Treasury disclosures. Even this smaller deficit was framed as a worst-case scenario, with the OBR explicitly stating that it was impossible to determine how much of this might materialise. That's when a Labour MP, Chris Philip, made Starmer and his Chancellor of the Exchequer embarrassed, asking them to apologise.
Now, I've read that report, as I'm sure others have, and nowhere in that report, nowhere, does it mention £22 billion. It's not there at all. In fact, the only reference they have to a number is to be found on page 2 and in table 1, and even the Treasury, straining every sinew, could only find numbers that added up to 9.5, and even there, the OBR says, and I quote, "It is not possible to judge how much of that might actually have been realised. So when the Chancellor said there is a £22 billion black hole, the OBR report yesterday now proves that was simply untrue. So will she come here and apologise for providing that number to the House when the OBR report now shows it simply wasn't true? And certainly doesn't justify £40 billion worth of tax rises, the largest tax rises in any budget in history.
Before we continue further, tell us, are you enjoying the video? If yes, please like and share the video, and subscribe to our channel for more exclusive videos on the groundbreaking changes happening in British politics. Let's continue now. Labour leaders subsequently attempted to justify the £22 billion figure by aggregating several unrelated budgetary pressures. These included £7 billion in additional spending pressures identified before the March budget, £5.6 billion in overspending on public sector pay awards, and other costs like asylum support and rail project overruns. On this, MPs have confronted Starmer.
After 14 miserable years of the worst Tory government in modern times, the best this Prime Minister can offer the British people is things can only get worse. Well, for him and his calamitous opinion ratings, that's probably true. But why does he think he has such an unprecedented fall in his popularity? Is it his attacks on the pensioners? Is it leaving children in poverty? Is it the re-emergence of Labour cronyism? Or is it because his austerity is even worse than the Conservative variety?
I remember when they used to sit here. It's a long way up and there's very few of them, so I don't think we need lectures on popularity.
However, critics, including former Conservative Chancellor Jeremy Hunt, accused Labour of over-egging the numbers for political advantage. Hunt went so far as to label the claim nonsense, pointing out that no independent economist supported the £22 billion figure. Despite this, the Labour continued using the claim of a £22 billion black hole, making it a central part of their narrative, allowing the government to deflect criticism for unpopular fiscal policies. By framing the gap as an unavoidable crisis, Labour justified significant tax hikes and spending cuts that disproportionately impacted middle and lower-income households. Public anger over reduced winter fuel payments and increased financial pressures was redirected toward the supposed economic mismanagement of previous Conservative administrations.
They are laughing the same way they all laughed during the budget when they talked about raising NI. They have no idea what people out there are dealing with. And that is why yesterday we voted against his damaging jobs tax. Even former supporters, Chef Tom Kerridge, who endorsed Labour at the election, said that the budget was catastrophic. He built a real business employing young people, unlike his cabinet of trade union stooges, CV embellishers, and an actual fraudster. None of them have ever run a business. Why, when he listened to business who are saying his budget is catastrophic?
This tactic was politically sensible, but suicidal. Critics argue that Labour deliberately exaggerated the scale of the problem to support its narrative of inherited chaos. By doing so, they may have undermined their credibility, not only with political opponents, but also with the public. The Treasury's role in perpetuating the £22 billion claim has come under intense scrutiny. As the department responsible for managing the nation's finances, the Treasury is expected to uphold the highest standards of accuracy and transparency. However, internal documents suggest that senior Treasury officials were aware of the discrepancies in the £22 billion narrative, but chose to proceed with it regardless.
We can't just tax our way out of the problems that they left us, which is why we put in place tough. They were howling at the spending decisions. They wouldn't take them, and we'll stick to those spending decisions. And our focus is absolutely on growth. But their record, they flatlined the economy. They flatlined the economy. A mini budget that crashed the economy. Worst cost of living crisis in living history, and they left a £22 billion black hole.
For the public, the £22 billion black hole has become a symbol of political manipulation. families struggling with rising costs, pensioners facing reduced benefits, and businesses burdened by higher taxes all feel betrayed by a government that promised to prioritise fairness and transparency. Polls conducted in the wake of the scandal reveal a noticeable dip in public confidence in Labour's economic expertise, with many questioning whether the tough decisions imposed on them were truly necessary.
Why is the government obsessed with clawing money back from all of us? I mean, they win with a massive majority, whatever, and they have this huge gain in seats and whatever. So why do they then want to make themselves incredibly unpopular straight away with elderly pensioners taking away the winter fuel allowance, with, going in with taxing national insurance and taxes? The state of this country with taxes is untrue. I mean, what is value-added tax?
I know.
What is my value-added? Do I have value-added tax on my spectacles, for instance? I don't know. Or if you were to buy tumblers like this, is there value-added tax on them? No idea. Why do some things have value-added tax and some don't? Ticked along quite nicely, owing money in the past. Most countries around the world owe money. Why this obsession with doing all the bad things and the hard things first?
This erosion of trust is disastrous for Labour's future, even if Starmer is not confessing it. While the party remains in power, internal dissent is growing, with backbench MPs calling for a re-evaluation of its economic strategy. Opposition parties, meanwhile, have seized on the controversy to portray Labour as dishonest and incompetent. And that's quite true. It's hard to understand why Starmer made decisions like putting heavy taxes and ending winter fuel payments to pensioners when there was no need. Number £22 billion black hole existed, but the public was punished heavily with taxes. And now, due to this, people are leaving the UK, mainly millionaires.
I wouldn't use the word fled, but I've left purely because of Labour's taxes and the increases they're going to bring out in the future, inheritance tax, capital gains, raise the tax rate. And, they're penalising the wrong people. So it's the entrepreneurs, the risk takers, the business people that create wealth, that create jobs, that, put more into the economy, but they're driving them out. And if they do this leaving tax, there's no way possible will people ever return. More millionaires are going to leave the UK than any other country in the next few years, and already 10,000 are going to be leaving this year. So Labour needs to relook at it and come up with another idea to raise money rather than penalising wealthy or successful people. They despise wealthy people, as you know. They're socialists, and they need to just change their plan or they're going to bankrupt the UK very quickly.
Not only that, but Britain's economy is declining, with inflation rising, and the only thing the Labour Party has to say is this: they were left with a £22 billion black hole. Perhaps Starmer has forgotten he is the Prime Minister, and it's his job to stabilise the economy and ensure growth, instead of blaming someone else as if he is in opposition. An MP gave Starmer and the Labour Party a reality check on this.
Government borrowing costs are at a 27-year high. Growth has been killed stone dead. Inflation is rising, impacting millions. Interest rates are staying higher for longer, and business confidence has fallen through the floor. The party opposite talked down the economy. They crippled businesses with colossal taxes, breaking all their promises. This is a crisis made in Downing Street. And, Mr. Speaker, it should hardly surprise the Chancellor that international markets are uneasy. The UK's long-term borrowing costs have risen to their highest in almost 30 years. But while the government was losing control of the economy, Mr. Speaker, where was the...
What do you think? What other lies Starmer and the Labour Party would have spread to justify their actions? Isn't it true that after the £22 billion lie has been exposed, Starmer has lost credibility as a Prime Minister? In the comment section right below, share your thoughts on why Starmer is putting high taxes when there is no £22 billion financial gap in the budget. Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, please like and share the video and subscribe to get more updates on British politics and how events are changing it. Until the next video, stay tuned.